How's everybody? So this is going to be our first full webinar, and we're going to be doing it on creating a set of rough-in plans. So we're going to start out, this is an equipment plan that's been finished. So we're going to basically start out at the beginning of the rough-in stage. So the tools we're going to go over in this webinar are Create, Place, MEP Views. We're going to use that to create our electrical plan and our plumbing plan. Then we're going to go to add electrical rough-ins, then add plumbing rough-ins, and then we'll add plumbing connections. The plumbing connections will just be used for the indirect waste over the like sink bowls, and really we're just placing the indirect waste exactly where they are on the equipment. And from there, we're going to go to the MEP devices, fire pools, convenience outlets, beverage conduits is what I have in here, and some floor sinks and gas manifolds. And then we're going to tag our rough-ins with tag all electrical and tag all plumbing. And finally, we're going to create some sheets with Sheet Creator. So first up, let's start with Create, Place, MEP Views. So typically you're going to have some placeholder views in your template. And so when you begin your project, the first step is to crop your view to actually fit your project. So when you get to the MEP stage, it's likely that your placeholder views will still need to be like recropped to the whole plan. And so this step is pretty difficult to do, to actually get this crop box to be the same as this crop box. The only way really to do it is to duplicate your equipment plan and rename it and change the view template and so forth. So that is what we're going to do with the Create, Place, MEP Views tool. So let's go back to. So when I click the Create, Place, MEP Views tool, this tool does two things. The top here, this is where you create your MEP views, and then the bottom down here is where you place them on your sheets. And we'll get to the place part a little bit later. But in the top here, in the Create part, over here in the top left corner, it's going to show all of your equipment plans. So it's finding these by the view template that you have set up in settings, and we'll pop into back and forth between settings as we go through the tools. And over here are the views that you want to create. So in this webinar, we're just going to do electrical plans and plumbing plans. And down here in the place section, it's going to show you all of your MEP views that already exist. So these were our placeholders over here, and this tool will replace those placeholder views for you. It's going to pop up a message that says, if you'd like to replace them, we can replace them for you. Press yes. It'll pop up a different message if these existing views already contain dimensions, text notes, or annotation tags. So let me just show you what that would look like. Because what we don't want to do is delete these views and replace them if they already had work done on them. So for example, if I just place the tag, a text note, and a dimension on this electrical plan. Now, if I went back to Create, Place, Views, you'll see it'll show up orange for each of those three. And if I tried to create these views now, you'll get a different message that basically says we're not going to replace those views because they do have some dimensions, some text, or some annotation tags on them. So we don't care about these views though. We'll leave one just so you can see it get replaced. So come here, select our equipment plan. We only have one in this project, and select the views we want to create. Press create. We'll say we're okay with replacing that placeholder. And it'll create those new views, and we can close here. And now if you go look at them, they'll be identical to our equipment plan, same size crop box, and we've applied the electrical plan view template to them. So that's the first step. That'll get us our MEP views that we can actually place our rough-ins on. And to complete this, if you go over into settings, this Create, Place, MEP Views tool, it's using this Views tab. And this is where you would set up your view templates, and this is how that tool works. It's using this equipment plan view template to find your equipment plans, and it's using these electrical plumbing view templates to find your electrical plan and your plumbing plan. So that is create place MEP views. Now we have our equipment plan, a blank electrical plan, and a blank plumbing plan. So next we'll go do the electrical roughins. I already have all the settings set up for this, so I'll run the roughins and then we'll go back and check on the settings. So to place all of the roughins, all we need to do is press the Add Electrical Roughin button. So it takes maybe a minute, 30 seconds. This placed 61 roughins and it skipped 16. And the reason it skipped those 16 is they do not have a roughin height. And so that's on purpose. It's meant to skip them because we're placing these roughins at their accurate height and in the wall as like a 3D object, if it is a 3D object. So when we don't have a roughin height, we're unable to place those roughins. So that's one thing you need to make sure of is fill in your roughin heights before you place roughins. So we can press OK, and if we zoom in, you can see some of our roughins here. Junction box, this is a single receptacle. These are stub up receptacles, stub up junction boxes. So the location that it's placing these roughins is dependent on your settings. So wall roughins are usually set up to be placed in a wall if the equipment is within, I think I have it set up to be 30 inches from a wall, but you can change that dimension. What will happen is it looks at the piece of equipment, it figures out the left, right, front, back. And so basically it looks at the back of the equipment and figures out how far away that is from the wall. And if it's within that threshold that you set, 30 inches for me, then it'll take the roughin and slide it back flush with the wall. If it doesn't find a wall behind the equipment, it will now also check the left, the right, and even the front of the equipment to see if there's a wall there for situations maybe where you have a refrigerator that's between two walls, not actually with a wall behind it or a wall in front of it. So it would, in this situation, if this had a roughin, it would be placed here, or here you go. It's over here in this wall. So the other half of the roughin tool, wall roughins usually get placed in the wall, and I have my stub ups set to just be placed in the center of the piece of equipment. So in that instance, we're taking the piece of equipment, we're figuring out the total dimension of the geometry, how much, total bounding box of the geometry, and then we're calculating the center point and placing the roughin there. But you can choose these locations in settings. You don't have to place it in the center of the equipment. You can place it in the center back, back left, back right, back center right, back center left. You can see some more here. These were, I think these are ceiling junction boxes over a certain height. These are roughins for these refrigerators. These are ceiling, nope, these are just high up junction boxes. Single receptacles and junction boxes being stub ups. Single receptacles in the walls. And here's one of our data outlets for the POS system. So here's a situation where it didn't find the wall behind it, but it did find the wall to the left of it, and that's where it put the roughins. So now let's pop over to settings so I can show you how this was configured. I set this up for this just using the default rules, which is just this button here, and just loading in these roughin rules. This loads in all of these 3D roughin symbols that come with the software that you're welcome to have. As you can see, I have the roughin height shown when they get placed, but that's something that you could turn off or remove. And so these rules that get loaded in, these are considered the default rules. You can change these how you see fit, but I'll go over how I have it set up, which is just very, very simply, it places junction boxes when the volts parameter is greater than 0, and where the electric connection type parameter does not contain the word cord. And I have single receptacles being placed when volts is greater than 0 again, but this time where electric connection type does contain the word cord. And finally, we're placing data outlets when electrical remarks contains the word data. So let me show you how this aligns with my electrical schedule. You can obviously set this up any way you want. It really depends on how you set up your electrical schedule. Is really how you're going to determine which outlets get placed or which junction boxes get placed. So I always use the electric connection type parameter to define whether something gets a cord and plug or whether it gets a junction box, or some other terms that we've used. But you could use something like the NEMA column, the connection plug column, or you could use electrical remarks. And for our data, we're using electrical remarks just for the data connection. So because this had the word data, I think the POS system was down here that we just saw. Because that contained the word data here, it got the data outlet. And because it contained the word cord here, it got the single receptacle. So these are called conditions, and these refer to what's going to be placed or when things get placed. Up here are actual roughins that we're placing. So when the roughin height is less than 6 inches, we're placing a stub up, and this is just my stub up junction box family. It actually got loaded in with this button, but you could select any electrical fixture family or conduit fittings or a few other electrical categories to place this floor roughin. And for our wall roughin, we're saying if the roughin height is above 6 inches, but below 90 inches, place the wall roughin. And again, it's just selecting which roughin you want to place that's already loaded into your model. And finally, ceiling is just the same thing, just selecting a ceiling box that we have loaded into our model when our roughin height is above 90 inches. We're not going to use connections for this one. So you don't have to place ceilings. You don't have to place floors. You could just place walls. This is just kind of flexible, so to really accommodate everybody, but you don't have to place all three if you don't want to. And as you see, when you start removing the floor or ceiling, the roughin threshold doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't matter what the roughin height is. It's going to place this wall junction box regardless. So I'm going to get that set back up though. And the other half is where the roughin's being placed. This is saying, place this roughin when this is true. Where that roughin gets placed, that is how we use the show placement options button. This little guy down here in the corner, this is actually a visual guide to kind of show you where the roughin's getting placed, but you can click here and see exactly. So this is a piece of equipment from Plan View, and these 6 checkboxes are the 6 different locations that you can place a roughin. So for my stub ups, I usually place them in the center, and for my wall outlets, I have them in just the center back for electrical. This dimension right here is that threshold in between the wall. So if this piece of equipment is within 30 inches of a wall, then it will move this roughin flush with the wall. If it's above 30 inches from a wall, then it's just going to place this roughin at the center back of the piece of equipment. And so you can see this little visual guide kind of adjust based on where your roughin location is, so you can kind of see it from the main screen. At the bottom here is a special setting that allows you to rotate your roughin annotation symbol. And this really comes into play when you have letters like J's or D's for plumbing, C's or H's. And the point is that because these are real 3D objects that are being placed, or they can be 3D objects that are being placed, you can use 2D roughins as well. It's going to have a sideways J if a piece of equipment is sideways. I can show you this really quick. It's already set up, so it's working, but this family has these 2 parameters in it, show normal J and show rotated J. And the purpose of this is just to rotate this annotation symbol. And so this setting here that we were just looking at, pop back to it, I have this set up to actually rotate this symbol when this parameter, or no, sorry, I have this set up to rotate this, and when I have this set up to rotate this when it's sideways. And what it's looking at is the specialty equipment family. So when the specialty equipment family is rotated at a 90-degree angle or a 270-degree angle, it will then trigger this parameter. So what's happening is when it places this roughin, it sees that, for example, this ice maker is at a 90-degree angle, 270-degree angle, one or the other, and it's automatically selecting this parameter, which then rotates this J. So this gives us this great, easy, readable roughins. Regardless of how our equipment is oriented, our symbols will always be legible. So that is really the two parts of these settings that you need to be aware of for electrical. When we get to plumbing, we'll go over this one down here. And so it's really just a toggle button. You can click it and toggle back to all of your family settings and all your conditions. And one last thing, if you just hover over this, you can kind of see what it's saying in there. So this is set up to rotate, and that's the rotate parameter. Data is not set up to rotate, and you can see it there. Some tips here when you're placing your roughins. If you have a, for example, data, I have data being placed in this back center right position, and that's because, like the POS system that we saw, the electrical is going to get placed here, and we don't want to put the data on top of the electrical, so you can just move it to the side so that you can see both roughins without them overlapping each other. So next, we're going to do our plumbing roughins. So let's go up to our blank plumbing plan. And here again, we're just going to press the Add Plumbing Roughin button. And so here, again, we place 35 roughins and we skip 27. And here we skip them because of roughin heights. And it seems like a very high number of skips, but this is actually on purpose. A lot of those things that were skipped are built into these counters. And we don't have roughin heights for them just because we didn't want to place all these individual roughins for them. We wanted to build these counters with final connections already built into them and just have a single connection going to the whole counter. So as we look around here, you can see the C's are for cold water, H's and C's for faucets. This is a faucet symbol, and I'll show you how that gets placed. And this is our direct drain. And so the plumbing is a little differently, and we're doing something with the combination rules. So I'll show you that here in settings so you can kind of follow with me here. For our plumbing, it's very similar to electrical up top. We're placing a hot water symbol when hot water size is greater than 0, cold water symbol when cold water size is greater than 0, direct waste when direct waste is greater than 0, or direct waste size is greater than 0. But when you get down here to the bottom to the combination rules, this is a special area that allows you to place one combination roughin in lieu of 2 individual roughins. So we have 2 of these combination rules. One is a hot and cold, which is like a faucet symbol. And the way these work is you're just selecting these rules as your conditions. So this is saying when this hot water rule passes and when this cold water rule passes, don't place these 2 individual symbols. Instead, place this one hot and cold faucet symbol. So this will allow you to kind of just reduce the number of roughin families that you're placing in your project, which is great for tagging and dimensioning and things like that. It just gets really, really clustered when you're placing hot, cold, and direct for every hand sink. So that's our other combination rule. It's for the hand sinks. So we have when hot water, cold water, and direct waste pass, then place this combination hand sink roughin family with hot, cold, and direct waste. Other than that, similar thing with our roughin height. We're placing stub ups when it's below 6 inches. And for gas, we're just placing gas size greater than 0, just wall for gas. So the one that looks different here is indirect waste. And indirect waste really isn't a roughin. It attaches, or it's a symbol that shows where the drains come out of the piece of equipment, or whether it's the bottom of a sink bowl or a combi oven or something like that. And really indirect waste goes to floor sinks or area floor drains or some type of floor receptacle. But the floor receptacle is really the rough-in part. That's the part that gets installed into the floor. The indirect waste is really just a generic annotation symbol that's showing where the waste is coming out of the piece of equipment. So we don't actually handle this with the rough-in tool. And that's why you see that these plus signs are not filled in. We handle it with the connection point tool. And so this will allow us to actually place all of these indirect waste symbols over top of the exact location where they're coming out of each piece of equipment. And let me place them first, and then we'll come back and go through that. So now with these roughins, that's why you're seeing, this is that faucet symbol where it's just one family. Faucet symbol, these are our gas symbol for the makeup air, hot water for the dishwasher, faucet. Here's another faucet symbol. You may be wondering why this isn't the hand sink symbol, but that's because this is two different families. So the faucet is getting this faucet roughin, and then the actual sink family just has direct waste in it. So it's the one just getting direct waste. So if I had a family that had, this was not a separate family, then this would be getting that one combination hand sink symbol instead. Faucets, these are all of our gas for our cook line. Cold water, these are stub ups, and that's why you're seeing these in the center here. Just because that's how I had them located. There's no wall back here for us to move them into. Same with here, this is another stub up. Hand sink, hand sink, hand sink. That's about it. Over here, hand sink and a work sink. And here, this mop sink this is our direct waste and our faucet, and I believe this is the hot and cold for the soap dispenser. So those are all of our plumbing roughins that we have placed. Now let's place our indirect waste. So we're going to use this Add Plumbing Connection button. And just to, this may look a little different than yours. I just went into Tool Manager and just turned off a bunch of stuff that we're not using today, just to kind of clean this up. So feel free to do that. Don't worry that yours doesn't look like this. So press Add Plumbing Connections. And this just placed 30 different connection points. Didn't skip any of them, usually doesn't skip any. And as we start looking around, you'll start seeing these little IW squares, which was the indirect waste symbol I have. So if you're wondering why they're getting placed here, that is because they're using these connectors that are inside the family. So this Hoshizaki ice bin, it has a drain connector coming out the center back. We're locating that connector location, and we're placing our generic annotation indirect waste symbol right over top of it. So the ice maker, here's its drain connection, that's its electrical connection, and that's its cold water connection. So if we keep going down, here's two compartment sink. You can see these are our two indirect wastes, and they're based off of these two sanitary connectors. 3 compartment sink. Here's the dishwasher. This is for the condensate hood, soiled dish table. These are the walk-in evaporator. This one's probably missing one. So let me show you how to add one. So connectors are something that, what is this? Connectors are something that most people probably don't use right now. They're somewhat useless for food service designers. The information is great to have, but unfortunately engineers can't use it with linked models. So just to give you a quick little recap on connectors, when you open up a family, just on the Create tab, there's this little section called Connectors, and there's 5 of them in here. We really only use these 3, electrical, duct, and pipe connectors. And so the way they work is they need to attach to a piece of geometry. So this is why in a lot of families you'll see, I'm just gonna draw a little circle, and I'm drawing this little circle extrusion because I need somewhere to snap this connector to. I could snap it to just the back of the evaporator, but the way they work, they basically go to the center of whatever piece of geometry you snap them to. So if I placed it on the back here, the connector would go into the center. But if I wanted to be a little bit more specific, I could just create a little extrusion and then just snap my pipe connector to that extrusion. So now I can click my pipe connector, and there's one specific thing that we want to make sure of, which is the system classification. This is really telling us what type of connector it is. So hydronic supply and return is what we use for chilled water. Sanitary is what we use for indirect waste and direct waste if you want. And then there's domestic hot water and cold water. And just to give you guys an insight, other is what is used for gas connections. Although there's lots of gas connections that are not other and they're set to hydronic supply. So something to watch out for. But our industry standards do say that other should be used for gas connections. So by adding this connector, I could associate this to indirect waste to get it smaller. By doing this, you'll now see that when I click this evaporator, you'll see this connector right here now. And that'll let you know that it will receive a connection point. If you're not sure what type of connector it is, you can use this piping button and you can usually see what type that connector is. So now just to show you, if I just did this one more time, we'll get our plumbing connection on top of that evaporator. You'll notice it won't duplicate any symbols, Roughins or connection point symbols. There's inside these connection point symbols, I've added just some parameters in here: item number, mark, type mark, the three descriptor parameters, three mark parameters that could be used, and we're moving the item number of the piece of equipment, which is 71 here. We're moving that to this connector right here. And that's one way we make sure we don't duplicate stuff. Same thing with Roughins. You know, this sink is number 63. So if I look at the Roughin for the sink, you'll see that it's 63 as well. So one thing that I always tell people is that these Roughins are not, they're not nested families. They really have no relation to these other families, just besides the fact that we copy over the mark number and some of the plumbing information or electrical information into that family. So we have all of our plumbing Roughins, we have all of our electrical Roughins. Next, we can go ahead and we can place our floor sinks or any of these other MEP devices that we may need to place. So let's see this one here. So here, I'm in the plumbing plan. So we have a fire pole we can place, try and maybe catch it on the way out. We can go and place some convenience outlets. I don't think I have any beverage systems in here. So that would be electrical. For plumbing, we would go and we would place our floor sinks. You can have the add plumbing Roughin button place floor sinks for you. The only thing is, it's going to place you could set it up to place a floor sink whenever indirect waste is greater than 0, and just place the floor sink in the center of the family. The thing is, it's just going to take a lot of tweaking. As you guys know, we use less floor sinks than we have indirect waste connections. So I could use this one floor sink here and I could catch the soiled sink and the dishwasher. Whereas if I hooked it up to the plumbing button, I'd get a floor sink here and a floor sink here and so forth. So it can be done either way. But I think manually adding the floor sinks is probably the best way, because if not, you're going to be forced to manually make them in the right location anyway. All right, so that's all I'm going to do for the MEP devices. And to show you guys how these are set up, you can see these lists, they can get longer as you set more families. So I don't have any exhaust family set, and that's why this is grayed out. But inside of settings, there's this MEP devices tab. here's where you can just set up your families. And this is just showing you in the electrical section, showing you all the electrical families in your project. The plumbing section showing you all the plumbing, families, which is plumbing fixtures category, pipe accessories category, pipe fittings category. And if I did set up mechanical, it would show you mechanical category, plumbing category, and I believe the duct fittings category for like exhaust ducts. So that's how you set up the MEP devices. You can see if I remove these beverage lines, press save. Now when I come up here, they won't be any buttons that you could choose. So once you have this set up, it'll only be the buttons that you guys actually use. So let's see, we can go ahead and start tagging. The one thing I think I forgot to go over is this software is set up to place 3D roughins. I mentioned that when you load in the default roughins that I have, it's bringing in a bunch of 3D roughin symbols. So here's the data outlet. This is a stub up data outlet. And so these symbols are getting loaded into your project if you use those default buttons. But if you don't use those default buttons, you can set up any family you want. You can set up 2D families. You don't need that 3D object. You'd still need to set your roughin height if you're using 2D families, but it's not a big deal that you don't have the 3D family. It's just a visual thing. When you're in 3D or in elevations or things like that, you can see these roughins. This is the junction box up here. This is a cold water shutoff valve there. Here's the direct drain, and this is the hot and cold faucet symbol. So you don't have to, the 3D, it's set up to place all these 3D roughins, but again, you don't have to do that if you don't want to. But if you do, there's usually probably some tweaking that needs to be done as well, just because 3D roughins are 3D geometry, and you need to make sure they're not clashing with the equipment, or in a good location to actually connect to the equipment. So those were the plumbing ones. Let's show you the 3D electrical. I guess you saw them already. Here's the junction box. Let me show you some of the stub ups. So these were the stub ups that were placed. This is a stub up junction box. These are stub up hot and cold. Stub up single outlets. And so you can, these symbols that I have in here, they're, these were set at 0 inches, so they're right there at the floor, but these are set up to actually, go up higher if you set that roughin height to higher than 0 inches. So I think we're ready to start tagging. So tagging, just like if you guys have used any of the other tag tools, if you don't know, tag equipment, tag casework, those tag specialty equipment category and casework categories. And then this tag all electrical, if you use a little arrow, you can see it tags electrical fixtures category, electrical equipment, data devices, and conduit fittings. So if I just use tag all, it's going to tag all 4 of these categories. For this, I'm only using electrical fixtures, but we'll just use tag all anyway. And the last thing here is the tag front and tag back buttons. These are used for all of the tag tools. So this is saying, do you want to put the tags at the front of the equipment, or do you want to put the tags at the back? And for roughins, I think tag back always works much better. So that's what we're going to use. So set tag back, and then we're just going to click the tag all electrical button. So it placed all of our tags. You can see it's tagging all of our electrical fixture boxes. It's giving this, it's tagging some convenience outlets too, so these numbers aren't correct. But this this number right here is the number inside the box, 78. And again, that was passed over from the piece of equipment that the roughin was for. So 78, 78, 78. So you don't have to tag everything at once. Like I'm looking at this, and this looks like this would probably have been better if it was tag front. So we could just highlight this section of equipment, and use the tag tool again, and this time it'll only tag what's selected. So you could do this more surgically, and you could just highlight certain sections and click either tag front or tag back to get it looking the way you want it to. Or you can just tag it all and just edit some of the tags or slide some of them over. For the most part, it's not too bad when you're tagging Roughins. It's not nearly as bad as tagging the equipment, just because they're spaced out nicely. So that is our completed electrical plan. Definitely could use a little touch up, but overall we have all our Roughins, we have all of our tags, and we're now ready to go to the plumbing plan. So same thing here, do identical to what we did for electrical, but this time we're going to use tag all plumbing. And I had it set to tag front, so I'm just going to press Control Z to undo and change to tag back. And so you can start to see why we really wanted those combination rules, because, for example, this faucet, instead of having a separate tag for the H and the C, we're just getting one tag into the center of the faucet. So this, in my opinion, makes it a lot easier. For tagging is one thing, but dimensioning, it goes hand in hand. So, you know, this way, when you dimension this family, it's going to put those dimensions, you know, directly between your tags, and you're going to have this nice, easy look where you don't have any lines, any extra lines that you need to worry about. You need to certainly change the 1/32, but that's, you get the gist there. So it didn't tag our indirect waste because these are not Roughins. These are a generic annotation family. There's no 3D image here or 3D geometry here. And because of that, that's why they're just these generic annotations. So when we do the next webinar next week, we go over connection points, and we do have tools that tag families that contain connection points. But for the most part, I don't think you need to worry about this. If you wanted to tag this, I could show you that in the next webinar. So this is our completed plumbing plan. Just looking around, make sure we got everything. And we are now ready to finish our submission. So we finished our electrical Roughins, we finished our plumbing Roughins, we tagged both of them, and we're now going to take these two views and create a couple of sheets, and then we could send out our submission and we'd be done. So let's see. So right now in this project, I only have one sheet. I just have this equipment plan sheet. I did go through the step of creating a sheet template to create electrical and plumbing sheets, and I'll show you that now so you can see what I'm talking about. But this is something that would normally just be set up already. You wouldn't be doing this every project. You just have it set up one time, and if you needed to just tweak some things on your sheet, you could just move them. But this tool will at least get all of the things that need to be on your sheet there: notes, details, legends, schedules, really anything but your floor plan view. Because if you remember, we're going to place our floor plan views using this Create Place MEP Views tool. So Sheet Creator has different sheet sizes, 24 by 36, 30 by 42, and 36 by 48. We're adding the ANSI sizes and the ISO sizes here really soon, so you'll start to see those as well. Down here, you would select your sheet size. I have it 36 by 48. And then down here at the bottom left in the sheet type, this is showing you the different templates for each of your different sheet types. So I don't have anything set up for the overall plan type or the equipment plan type or even the special conditions. But if you get to my electrical, you'll see these are the 5 different views from Revit that I want to place on my electrical plans. And these are the locations where they're going to get placed. So this is from the bottom left corner. So this is like your origin, this is your X, and this is your Y. So this note is 5 inches over and 31 inches up, which is kind of like way up here. You can manually edit this stuff if you want, but I recommend to create these templates, just use Revit. So let me show you how I just created these. I just created a new sheet, and I just put the stuff on my sheet how I would usually expect to have it, and this way I don't have to. This way I don't have to try and mess with the dimensions inside the sheet creator. You know, make your sheet in Revit. It's easy to drag and drop and to move stuff around in here. Oops, we have electrical schedules. We bring in here. Fit wants to work with me. And what else are we missing? And I'd probably also add some like a detail of Ansel detail or disposer detail or something like that. Oh, and the legend. So this is how I would create this template. I would set up my electrical sheets, just kind of a default, put all the stuff that needs to go on there and put it in the best location I can, to be honest. And then when you go back to the sheet creator, if this wasn't here already and it was like this, the way you would do this is click this plus button, and you'll see if you highlight it, just says clone sheet. And it's really what it does. It just takes an existing sheet and copies all the views into this template. So if I click this, this is that new sheet that I just made. If I added it, you'll see here are all those views that are on this sheet. The notes, the disclaimer here, the pull station here, the legend, and the schedule. So this is something that you would do, you know, beforehand, and then you can use this export and import button to share these with the rest of the office, or just save them onto your hard drive for future projects. The other thing to know here too is once you create this sheet template, once you save Revit, this will stay. So if you did this in your template file and just saved, then anytime anybody opened up that template Revit file, this stuff would already all be here. So you really should only have to do this once, or maybe if you want to, you could create a few different type of sheet templates for different size floor plans. So once we have our templates, I did a plumbing and electrical. That's the only two I have in here right now for this webinar. You can click next, and this is where you actually create the sheets that you want to create. So over here in this sheet list preview, it's showing all of the sheets in my current model. And remember, we only have the two sheets. We have this QF110 that my equipment plan, and then this one I just made. And then over in the top left corner, this is just a prefix and a suffix. A little trick: you don't have to worry about the word equipment being duplicated. We have something set up in there. So if you had this as equipment plan and it put the prefix, it's not going to say food service equipment plan. It'll just say it once. And so that's our prefix and suffix. This is going to get added to this name right here, which is going to turn into this complete name here. And let's see. And the last part is just to tell how many sheets we want. So we want to create one electrical plan and one plumbing plan. This is the default sheet number in a series. So if I was to show you, if I did this, it's going to move these over. And these are really proposed. We haven't created them yet until we press create, but you'll see one is QF130 for here and one's QF140. But if this was a larger project and you had more than one kitchen, you needed more than one electrical and plumbing sheet, if you press the button again, it's just going to find the next available number by incrementing this value. So it won't be able to duplicate sheets. Revit doesn't allow that even anyway, but this is how you would create your sheets. So now that we have these sheets proposed, I can just press create. And it's going to create the sheet. It's going to put all these views on the sheet in the location that we had in our template. And the last step that we will need to do is just place our floor plan views. And then we have completed sheets that we can send out for our submission. One of the things that this does that you may see here is it will duplicate the views that Revit doesn't allow to be on more than one sheet. So one of those is drafting views, like details. If you had two electrical sheets and you wanted to have the same disposer detail or pull station detail on those sheets, we're just going to duplicate it and create a copy of it. And that way we can put the copy on the second sheet, just because Revit doesn't allow this single detail to be placed on more than one sheet. All right, so let's delete this QF 141 sheet. So this was our equipment. This was our equipment plan sheet, and this is the electrical sheet that we just created. See our notes, the detail, legend, schedule, and this disclaimer. One thing that you will have to do that we're not able to do with the Revit API is these little titles. These headers are really think of the name, but you can, I have this. If you click one of these views and you click edit type, you can create a type that doesn't show the title. So I have two types, one for plans and details and one's for notes, legends, and schedules. And the only difference is the notes, legends, and schedules do not show this title. So if I just click this view and click this little drop down, you can see these two here. So this would show the title and this would not. So this is one step you'll have to do. We're not able to do it with Revit. So if anything that doesn't need a title, you'll have to come up here and change that to get rid of those titles. So I don't need these. Actually, we don't need these second ones that we created. So that was our electrical, and this is our plumbing. Same thing, I'd come up here, I'd get rid of this, do it for this one, and that one doesn't have it. And now all we're missing is our floor plan views. So I think I can actually leave this open. We can watch this happen. So we're going to go back to our create place MEP views. And this time we're going to use this place section down here. And so here are our sheet numbers. We want to make sure these match up. We want to place our plumbing plan on 140 and our electrical plan on 130. And the other thing that you need to see here is these colors. I'm going to do a quick little duplicate to show you. If you add more than one equipment plan, you'll notice that they each get their own unique color. And this is on purpose. This is so that we can match them up to their MEP views. When you create these, when you create these views, we know what color because we're creating it from this equipment plan. But if you were to go and, if you had unique names in here that we weren't able to follow, just because they were different than the equipment plan naming, then you'll get something like this, where it won't show you the color, just because we're unable to know what did this go with? Which equipment plan did this electrical plan line up with? So if something like this happens, you can just right click this and you can say that electrical plan was for that equipment plan. And the whole point of this color scheme is that when we place these views on our sheets, we want to place them in the same place as the equipment plan on the equipment plan sheet. So if our equipment plan is placed in this location, this top right corner, we would like our electrical plan to be placed in that exact same location. That way, you kind of have like a flipbook effect with all of your views kind of lining up perfectly. So to do that, our colors match up, so that's all good. We don't want to place those on the sheets. And so we're going to place plumbing plan QF 140 and electrical on QF 130. And so you'll kind of see this happen live. Place. And that was our electrical plan. Got a bit over, and here is our plumbing sheet. So that is how you would create Roughins with KitchDesigner. A lot of this was kind of going over a lot of setup things that you're usually going to get done just probably once and share it with the rest of the company and not have to really worry about it again. And this is a step that I'm happy to help you guys with. There's a lot of different ways it can be set up, and pretty much everybody has their own unique symbols and unique locations that they want to place things. So I can help you guys get through all of the setup of all the settings so that you guys can kind of just run with it with your own templates. So thank you guys so much and have a great rest of your day.